Who's taking the lead here? How much of this are we ready to say? What do we even think about this?
This week, I worked on writing a scene for our book that has no action in it, no decisions being made, and yet we think it's going to be one of the most crucial scenes in setting up a lot of the plot of our book.
This is a spoiler episode.
Yes, a spoiler episode. We're getting into a lot of the details on what this scene is. So we're going to talk about what the scene is, why we think it's so important, and then some of the things that go into our thought process of how we want this scene to look in the book. Were you going to say something?
I'm ready
right.
if you're ready to
All
hit
right.
it.
So this scene is probably going to be first or second chapter, and it is where Arnold, our protagonist, is telling his parents some of the information that he has just learned about himself and kind of confirming some of the things with him about how he came to their family, that he was dropped off as a safe haven baby. We learn about a little bit more about his abilities that he has because he was genetically modified. And this is where his parents find out that he was genetically modified. And their reaction to this new information about him sets up who they are as people, because this is the first time that we actually meet Arnold's parents. And so this scene is one of the reasons it's important is because it is introducing us to them.
Yeah, and we were talking earlier about, even though, like he said earlier, there's no real decision made here. There's no action taken. Nothing affects anybody outside of just that group of the family. But through this interaction, we do get to see some of it's important for what is going to happen to make believable what happens over the overall story arc. So we see that. It's also important to the theme of the book, which is the whole parent-child relationship. Mm-hmm. So we are introducing that parent-child relationship, Arnold and his parents. Plus, it's also a part of it's instigating some of Arnold's growth, both intellectually about what he learns about himself, emotionally, motivationally, how he makes his decisions. So there's so much about Arnold that we're going to have to learn through the lens of this particular scene.
And some of that is a decision that Arnold needs to make in the coming chapters that in isolation, it seems unreasonable for him to make that decision. And this scene kind of sets up a little bit why this is the decision that he makes. But in looking at how I wanted this scene to unfold, one of the things that I had to think about is which of his parents I wanted to be involved in this conversation. Is it just his mom? Is it just his dad? Is it both of them? And I settled on it being both of them, in part because I think that they have different poles on how the conversation would go. This is the first time that we were introduced to the characters, so some of this is also us as authors figuring out who these characters are. But in exploring that, his mom is a little bit more cautious and can't figure out exactly what word I'm trying to... Cautious isn't quite the right word.
You said hesitant.
Hesitant a little bit, yes. She wants to kind of think things through fully before fully jumping in. And his dad is somebody who has really loved the idea of this ability that Arnold has and is fully convinced that there's something special that Arnold can do with it. So when presented with this idea that scientists gave him this to accomplish a specific purpose, he's a little more ready to kind of jump in and explore that a little more. And that's not exactly where we want the conversation to go. We want that middle ground where we look at that a little bit, but also stay grounded into how this affects Arnold right here, right now. So thinking through where we wanted the conversation to go kind of affected who I actually wanted to be involved in the conversation. And then another part that we're thinking about is the way that his parents interact with each other and not just with him. And this is something that I'm very grateful that I am not doing this on my own. that I have somebody writing with me who has been a part of the silent conversations between parents when presented with information from their kid.
As I was reviewing what Nathan had written, I was looking through, and there was a certain point where I thought, what parents would really do about this time is that they would be looking at each other, trying to figure out, okay, who's taking the lead here? How much of this are we ready to say? What do we even think about this? Am I speaking? Are you speaking? Okay, it's your speaking. You go. You take this. And how to communicate that, what Arnold would notice about that. But I can bring the perspective of, what would mom and dad really be doing around here?
Right. And what facial reactions, and how do you describe those facial reactions in writing without being able to show it on a screen is something that's going to be a little difficult.
But it was important to include that because that relationship between the parents, all of that unspoken dialogue, says something about the strength of their relationship, and it means that whatever is spoken, we as readers now know that this middle ground that you're describing is actually representing both of their viewpoints.
Mm-hmm. And we were thinking about what are some scenes in books and movies that are similar to this one right here, in that they don't really directly move the plot forward. There's no actions, no decisions that are important in the scene, but are still very important for setting things up. And one of the ones that we thought of was the scene with Luke at the dinner table talking with
Luke
Skywalker, yes.
Star Wars.
Luke Skywalker in Star Wars, talking with Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru around the dinner table. And coincidentally, my scene also takes place around the dinner table with parent figures that aren't actually parents. And one of the things that we saw, we just watched through that scene, and I didn't realize that when thinking about the scene originally, but that same looks are exchanged there between Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru when Luke brings things up. And this isn't the first time that Luke is seen in the movie, but it is an early scene with Uncle Owen, and it's the first scene with Aunt Beru. And so it's an introduction to their characters. It talks about some of the conflict a little bit between the characters and sets up a little bit motivations for things going forward.
So very similar in purpose and scope for the scene that we had. I was surprised as we were watching, go, oh, did you see what they did there?
And we paused it, like, they did the same thing. They did the look. Yeah. But that's the scene that I've been working on. This is why we think it's so important, even though it doesn't have action, doesn't have decision in it. So our question for you this week is, what is a favorite or notable scene that doesn't have action or decision in it, but is still vital in the plot of the movie or the book? Let us know in the comments, and we will see you next week.